Loud. And I will share over to our agenda. So
Eric, I have a question. Is Bill, or Bill, I should ask you, did we get that far back in March or earlier? Are you officially the chairman of this committee?
Yes, I
Good.
believe so. I think I was
Great.
chairman before becoming treasurer. So yeah, so
Great.
So
So you are both chairman and treasurer.
correct. Yes.
Excellent. Good. Thank you. We're in good hands. Lucky you.
Good. What a great title. Yes.
All right, Eric, sorry to interrupt.
Hey.
Eric, you frozen?
Eric, you look like you're frozen.
Eric, can you hear us? Strangely.
Right. Yeah.
Oops,
Here we go.
okay.
Something's how he's come off now. Okay.
How was your daughter's move?
It's good. Yeah.
Where did she relocate
She
to?
moved to Lake Forest, Wildwood, I think it is, near the college area. So yeah, no, they're really excited, and we were over there for a housewarming party stroke birthday party for Maggie. So we're so she's excited, glad to get away from the city.
Sure. Well, that's nice. It's a nice time of the year to move into a new house.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the people that they bought it from took excellent care of everything.
Right.
They were and left them like a 3-page instructions of all the different things and how to turn stuff on and off and
that's great.
when to do it.
Yeah.
So,
it's wonderful.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened to Eric there. Oh dear. Okay.
Yeah, it looks like maybe somebody with his internet connection.
I bet. Actually, while we're waiting for, I was going to ask you, are you considering running for your position?
Yeah, I do.
Good.
I probably would need to chat with you and Cal maybe a little bit about what the process is, and
sure.
And obviously this year or next year it's going to be different again.
Yes. Eric usually stays the most up to date on that stuff. But the strange thing about it is all the paperwork has to be done by December, even though the election's not until April. So there's kind of this scramble to do stuff that seems very foolish because, especially with the general election year, it seems to be not particularly. Okay, Eric just sent me a text. Okay, his internet is down. Well, he'll have to figure that one out. I'll tell him. Are you and Bill still on? Yes, we are.
Yeah. What if he can join by phone? Well, then he won't be able to see the.
He's got the documents. Can you?
Yeah, I think I might be able to.
Okay. So anyway,
what does the packet of information? Oh, here's Eric now.
Oh, hi. Can you hear us?
Fresh there for an exciting 2 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. I was just talking to Bill. I'm thrilled he's going to run for his position. And we were catching him up, or I was trying to catch him up on that. It's sort of a December deadline. And there's this vote committee also called the caucus. The name it forever changes, but Eric had a recent email from them. He may have shared that with all the trustees, but they're not going to do the typical town meeting thing that they've done in the past, but there is going to be a drive-through signature gathering, which is probably important because the only thing you really have to do is fill out a form and then get signatures And it's a very weird thing. It's like equal to 1% of the last election, and no one ever knows how many signatures that is. So I think 50 is always kind of the where you start out as,
Okay.
as an estimate. So if you can get those through some organized event, it's the easiest, especially under the circumstances. I also would be very happy to help you get signatures. I can wander around my neighborhood, or, we can make that work for sure.
Okay.
But Eric, I'm going to rely on you to find out maybe some deadlines and pickup dates. And it's usually pickup stuff at the village, but then you have to go into Waukegan to, it changes every time. But Eric, I'm really going to put this on you, if you don't mind, to figure out the where do you go and what do you get kind of stuff.
Okay.
And if I can, I'll be your backup at the village if you need them. So we'll work it out.
And I'll be the only one that's sitting at the moment who's going up for election. I think you and Cal are 2 years.
That's right. That's right. And Janie also is, I'm pretty certain, on the same cycle as we are.
Okay.
So, and Eric, you could double check all that for us so we kind of have that schedule for the next board meeting so everybody knows when they're supposed to do what.
Right.
But perfect timing, because we got 6 candidates, I think, for positions. So if we can get everybody in sync with what has to happen, we can help everybody get through this painlessly.
Okay.
Right. So.
Sounds good.
Okay.
So we don't really have a, as noted, to take a look at here. So that will take us straight away to the subject of the evening, which is setting the levy for fiscal year 21-22. So obviously, as with everything in the year 2020, this is much more complicated than in previous years. So what I made an effort to do here is just to lay out some of the main considerations, where we're at in terms of financial situation, and then what are some of the big points that we'll be wrestling with as far as considerations in setting the levy for next year. Starting at the top there with some basic information as far as the levy, we had approved a levy for the current fiscal year of 2020-2021 of $987,531. Of that amount, we've received $781,000 and some change. We received just another $250 here in September. That's about $200,000 short.
Uh-oh.
Of where things are still spread out as they've been. So fingers crossed, the conventional wisdom continues to be that we're going to get close to everything. The next 2 or 3 months are really going to be pivotal as far as whether that proves to be mostly or not at all correct. So there's some uncertainty involved there. That's where we're starting as far as the levy situation. The numbers that I got for Bettina, I had sent this out to the full board, and then I had sent it out again to the finance committee on Bettina's write-up for the village, which includes the numbers and calculations for the library. So Bettina, in doing the math on that, works from a variety of numbers. Some of them, like the CPI, come from the state. Others, like the EAV for Lake Bluff, come from Lake, and then she puts all that together into plugs all that into an equation. And there's a little bit at that point of an art to it, as far as a little bit of a fudge to it as far as getting the absolute finest, closest possible prediction. Bettina does pretty good, but I think you know, our experience with her predecessor with Susan was that you could tell Susan had been in her job in the community for a really long time, because I don't really know where Susan's estimate as far as um, you know, taking the amount, translating it into a percentage to be applied to property tax bills, where that most exactly spot on. And Bettina does really good, but I think the last year or two, I think we've kind of, she's been off a little bit more, but it's only been 1,000 or two. It's mostly noticeable just because I think Susan was so fantastic with it. But in any case, so the first number that Bettina creates is the number working with a property tax extension law limit rate that includes the CPI, the cost consumer price index number,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically inflation. The CPI for this year is set at 2.3%, which results in a PTEL rate, which if we were not a home rule community would be the maximum that we could levy. And generally speaking, the village likes us to have a good explanation if we're going to exceed that. Though ostensibly legally we don't. But the rate with that CPI is 2.644%, which results in a projected fiscal year 21-22 levy of $1,013,829, which would be an increase of 26,118. The second number that Bettina had calculated for the village and the library is a PTEL increase with a neutral CPI factor. So zeroing out that portion of the equation. And what that basically does is it captures new construction in the community, but it does not allow for any change in for inflation in the CPI. So that would result for next fiscal year in an increase to $991,036 for a levy, which would be an increase of $3,325. The third number that Bettina had calculated is pretty easy, pretty straightforward. It's just a straight flat across freeze, which would be requesting exactly the amount that we requested for this year, which is $987,711.
So Eric, just real quick, why the number at the start and the number at the finish? If the levy on the first line of the financial information, I know we're only talking about hundreds of dollars. One says 987,531 and one is 987,711.
What was the question?
Well, you see on the first paragraph, under
Yep.
financial information, the number is 987,531, and if it's frozen, then on the last line of that paragraph is 987,711. Wouldn't they be one of the same numbers if the levy for 2020-21?
Yes.
I mean, we're only
I
talking
believe
about $180, but
there was a small change to it right when it was approved last year. Something in the EAV that changed. Either Bettina or I is pulling from the from an old document that we should not be pulling from.
Okay.
Let me double check quick, and I should be able to pull you. Here we go. It's the 711.
Okay.
711 is the correct number.
Right. Okay.
Good question.
Right.
Consistency is important in these things. Thank you
Right.
for noticing that. Okay. Any other questions as far as those three totals?
Hmm.
Eric, just FYI, I've been taking notes. If you'd like me to continue and have these for minutes, I'm happy to do that.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Sure, happy
No.
to.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah, you have enough to fiddle around with. So go ahead and do it.
Yeah, there's who would have guessed that um, working from home would end up being just so frenetic. Okay, so jumping on then to considerations. So I broke these out into two categories. First is budgetary and the other is external. Basically, what do we need to consider in terms of what we've got going on? And then also, what is going on in the village and in the larger community that we need to be thinking about in terms of our rate. Budgetarily, some of the factors that we've got as our most significant. The one that jumped out to me in my mind was remembering 2 years back, which Kathy, you were there, so you remember what a fun time it was where we, did go in front of the finance committee,
Yeah.
and we, talked over that we just done that big roof replacement, and that took a huge chunk of our reserve,
Yeah.
and that we needed to kickstart the process of building that back up. Otherwise, we were potentially going to deplete or worse, run completely through our reserve if we ended up with another major capital project that came up anytime soon. So that was um, only the second time that the library had ever made a request to go over the PTEL extension. And as part of that, we had anticipated that we were going to hold ourselves to PTEL extensions and continue to take that rate, and then that was going to allow us to continue to set aside $20,000 to $25,000 per fiscal year. Now, um, that jumped into my mind, since if we were going to do something other than the PTEL rate, that would be something that we would want to consider as far as how we were going to approach that aspect of it. Because, if we continue to take the PTEL rate, it continues to be pretty straightforward to keep that 20,000 set aside each year as a transfer to reserve, but it takes a bit more work as far as making that money available to go otherwise budgetarily. Particularly with some of the other challenges that we've got, the most notable for the next 3 years still is going to be that we're still playing catch up in terms of the staff pay rates. We still have a lot of our staff that is under that $15 an hour. A growing number of whom are, now being lifted year to year by the rising tide set by the state. So this coming year, we're required to have everybody up to $12 an hour. We've been pushing people upwards, but we've got a growing number of people that have the raises that we've been using to push people upward. We're now getting caught up by these dollar every year additions, and so we'll probably end up with a pretty good chunk of folks caught up in that by the time we get to the eventual $15 an hour.
That's by what year?
Let's see, it's 2021. January 21 is $12. January 22 is 13. 23 is 14. And then
The 24.
Yeah.
24 is 15. So they've got a boost. At least we didn't have to do it all at once.
Right.
So that's a challenge. I know some of the other libraries, there's a lot of conversation among libraries in the area as far as what libraries are aiming to do. And I know that there's some libraries out there that really aiming to try and keep their levy as low as they possibly can. And one of the things I am seeing out there is by some of those libraries to really hold down staff costs. That's more of a challenge for us. A lot of the bigger libraries in that area, um, I joke about this sometimes with Catherine Lemmer over at Lake Forest. Um, they don't have to worry about this. They had everybody well over $15 an hour already. So she's been trying to do cost control on some of their salary, get the levels a bit lower, point of fact. So um, then, um, considerations that we've got there. The library is, presently, we've gotten ourselves to a position where while the time is limited, we are offering most now of our traditional services where the building is open again. It's streamlined in that there's fewer hours, though the experience is, of course, as with everything in COVID world, more complicated. But we have other things that we've added as well in terms of, digital resources and programs, as well as, new resources like the tutor.com that we're going to be offering, and some of the digital initiatives with the school. So what that adds up to is that in terms what we're offering, we're kind of offering a greater diversification of things than we would under normal circumstances. Just because that's generally what a hybrid model, which is what we're in right now, boils down to, is offering as best you can the best of both worlds, physical and digital. But that does create some additional considerations and pressures on a budget. Ordinarily in normal times, there's things that we don't jump in on in terms of digital, or don't expand into in physical, because we try to be very mindful as far as what we're committing ourselves to. It's a bit more of a challenge in COVID land. I did talk with Bettina today as far as what the calculation for a 2.644% increase would be on a home with a value of 750,000. So the net increase in property taxes would be $14 from the bill this year to the bill next year. And that would be an estimated property tax bill of 15,000 and a few $100s change, if that can be counted as change. And then that Bettina sent to me is as far as her using property tax bill and then walking it through. So if you'd like to take a look at that calculation, I can share that with you. Some of the external factors. One that we've been keeping an eye on, that we always try and keep an eye on when things get interesting in terms of the discussion regarding the levy, is what the village is considering doing. The Village Finance Committee did hold its first meeting on September 8th to elaborate only slightly on the email that I'd sent out as far as the follow-up on that. By a 3-2, it's a 5-member committee. By a 3-2 majority, the committee members were in favor of a PTEL increase with a 0% CPI factor. So that's the middle choice that we looked at of the 3 up top. The increase that the impact of the village's increase would also be pretty modest, in the neighborhood of $25, I believe, give or take, is what Bettina had calculated. The person that really kind of stepped in after some debate had already happened and took the lead on that position of doing that as a course of action was the village president, Kathy O'Hara. Sorry, getting my
Please
Kathys confused.
don't,
Yeah.
don't put that one on me.
And as Kathy O laid it out, it is a gesture that the village wants to be mindful that wants to make a gesture on that. In addition to a gesture for the community, Kathy O also mentioned it being a gesture for other taxing districts within the community and wanting to provide leadership for the other taxing districts within the community. So the village very pointedly did not take action at that meeting. They have their next meeting tomorrow night. Because I'm going to be working tomorrow and I'll most likely be in transit at 6 o'clock, I probably won't be able to attend this one. So if anyone else would like to, that would be amazing. Point out that this was, I mean, when I say that it was 3-2 consideration, the two people who were against taking the 0% CPI increase were very against it. This was a friendly debate, but it was very much a debate. Mark Dewart and can't remember Onkenman, Barbara Onkenman, were the two who spoke out against, and they were very adamant that they felt that this was a very bad idea, and cited that the village had already dealt with a shortfall in the revenue this year by foregoing a number of capital projects, and that the state was quite probably going to be shifting a growing amount of pension responsibilities onto municipalities, so that more of that would be shifted to a local level. Bill, for this is a common thread. It's generally something the library doesn't have to deal with, but with the sales tax revenue as well as handling of pensions, the village has a number go through the state, whether it's things that are being revenue that's being gathered by the state or that is a shared in management with the state. And one of the monkey wrenches that the village has perpetually ended up dealing with over the last 4 or 5 years is that the state has been making efforts to try and right its financial ship, in part by shifting responsibilities to municipalities. They're paying for less by asking communities to pay for more. So that's where the village is at on that.
The two people,
so they're
the other two people, were they in favor of the PTEL with the CPI factor in there, or
yes?
Okay, so no one was for a frozen levy then. So it's really options 1 and 2 of the upper head.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I wouldn't be stunned by any of the three, and tying in with the consideration there. I was in on a conference call with other village administrators then later in the week, and Drew straight up asked the superintendent, Dr. Layeli, if she felt that it was possible that the school district 65 would take or pursue a zero CPI or a straight up freeze. And there's still conversation that needs to happen there, but Dr. Lieli's reply on that was that it was a pretty quick no, that she didn't think it was likely, which would be my guess. They're dealing with a lot in terms of everything that the schools have to do in terms of providing infrastructure to make this hybrid model work. So that, in terms of gestures makes things a bit more of a challenge, because District 65 and District 115 make up the big chunk of the tax bill. The library's portion of the property tax bill for an average home is about 2.5% of the revenue goes to the library from a tax bill. The village is 8 to 7%, depending on the year. And then I think it's 35 to 40% for District 65 and District 115. They take up a solid 70, 75%.
Eric, how many village trustees are there?
7.
7. So this committee is 5 of 7.
Right.
Okay.
So it's a good representation, but it's also at the same time that if the two individuals who are not on the finance committee happen to agree with Mark Dewart and Barbara Onkenman, that could be an awkward proposition at that point, where you've already on the finance committee that makes a recommendation, but then you could hypothetically end up with a majority of the board not agreeing with it, which would be exciting, but then everything is in 2020. Yeah.
Eric, do you know, this is sort of maybe a discussion question, but is there anywhere between 0 CPI and the 2.3 that's a compromise in there? Instead of having just 3, is there a fourth one that could be a portion of the CPI going in there? Has that ever happened before, or is it an all or nothing? It's either all of the CPI or not. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Yeah.
So we could, we could take any amount. Hypothetically, because we are a home rule community, we can always go over that. Generally speaking, we try to have a reason and be able to stand up and explain what we're doing and why anytime that we have.
Well, one thought that comes to mind is that the percentage of our budget that goes towards personnel versus the percentage of budget that goes to the village personnel, is that a much smaller factor for them versus us? So I mean, if we're, I don't know the exact numbers, but just say it's 20, if we're 30% of our budget is in personnel, and the village is 20%, and the rest of that are capital projects and various things there, which they have the ability to control, and we have less to control based on what we have. That could be one argument if it goes to a 0 CPI, especially given the fact that we've got to look at raising those personnel costs up.
Sorry.
So, and then the other factor would be, would a counter argument to that be the fact if you had one less person in a part-time role, would that be sufficient to help offset the increases that would be needed? And again, personnel-wise, this is sort of a strange year with with a kind of with some of the services that we're offering.
in terms of the village first, they, uh, yeah, they've got a lot more of their budget that's centered around those capital projects,
Yeah.
which are, provided you don't put yourself in a situation where you've got, blocks that are, falling into the blocks of the city that are falling down into the sewers, or,
Yeah.
the viaduct just plugs and becomes a permanent lake. Provided you avoid those sorts of things, there's a lot more, there's wiggle room
Mhm.
with most of them. The village
Right.
in particular has a certain amount of fungibility. They had really been, in terms of their reserve, building that up
Yeah.
to do a number of big projects, which puts them in a position now to have even more wiggle room, because
Mm.
they can move the projects, and they also have extra money that they've saved up into reserve.
Yeah.
But I interrupted you there, as jumping in, Kathy.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I can understand the, the minority opinion on that committee, considering the uncertainty, not just of, well, the CPI has gone up, but in sales tax has gone down, and they've already cut back expenses that projects that they had hoped to be doing this year. So they've got to be careful they don't go too far behind plan. So I don't know. I don't know where it'll be interesting. I can't attend that meeting tomorrow night, but it'll be interesting to see if they keep this, um, this.
I think generally yeah, really they've been recording them as well, so that could
Oh,
be.
we did. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
I'll
If,
take a
if
look at that.
Eric, if you send me the information, I'll if it's a Zoom meeting, I can check in, and then I can report back.
It is interesting being in on the meetings with the village, because they do make use of the moderator function, so that you've got the panel of the members of the committee, and then they can all see each other and everybody can see them, but everybody else is just in the audience and can't see. So it's kind of almost it's a very real fly on the wall sort of experience.
So you don't know who's talking or anything like that, or?
Well, it's them. So you know who's talking,
Oh, okay.
but you know that you're there as an observer, and you don't know who else is in the audience with you.
Okay.
Is what gets to be interesting for me. Like I know Lisa Lielli mentioned later that she was there as well, which if she hadn't told me, I would never have known. Because the only person that I knew was definite as far as a observer was me. Yeah, they are have been posting the videos of the meetings as well on their
Okay.
agenda and minutes page. So there's always opportunity there to catch up after the fact. I'll stop sharing here for just a moment. Actually, it might be better to send this via email. I posted the link to the agenda and minutes there in the chat.
Got it.
So that's where we're at. What I've been really taking a look at over the last week is moving around the numbers in terms of very early look at the budget for next year, and trying to really work out as much as possible the numbers as far as what we're going to be looking at budgetarily, working with that levy. Fingers crossed. When we get to next year, we'll be looking at a year where all or most of it will be like a conventional year, where we'll be able to be fully open and do things like the passports, so that we'll be looking at having our full range of revenue. If it's more like this year, that gets to be a more interesting scenario in kind of a narrower window as far as what we'll be doing, but it's hard to say.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen some really encouraging estimates as far as when, you know, treatments and vaccines in particular could be available. But, you know, I've also seen some statements from folks who are very credible on these things, suggesting that it could be pretty late in 2021 before we see broad availability.
Right.
And as with pretty much anything in 2020, at this point, I'm just kind of, it'll get here when it gets here at this point. So
Yeah, I personally feel we should be extremely conservative because there is so much uncertainty. And then there's things like, you know, a general election ahead of us and everything else. So there's, you know, we might be peddling passports, but people may not be traveling. So I think we need to look, it's great to be optimistic, and that would all be in our favor, which would be terrific. But at the same time, you know, we've got to, you know, look at things conservatively and go day by day and protect our interests accordingly. And if it's a good year, that's great. I don't think there's anybody that's going to not be happy for that. But if anything, this year taught us to be ready for almost hourly surprises. So that didn't seem to be changing much.
yeah,
That's for sure.
the last 4 days with it seemingly almost hourly updates on people in government having coronavirus now is, what can I say, 2020. So in terms of the focus for the meeting tonight and the looking towards you know, an outcome for the meeting, the due date, as far as how late we could approve the full village board and the library board could approve their levies would be start of December, which is off. Terrifyingly, that's only 2 months off, but it's not something that has to be approved at the October meeting. Right now, the village is targeting approval at their November board meeting. So my strong recommendation at this point is to not make an approval or recommendation right now. You know, for the moment, you know, let's continue to see how the discussion goes with the village, as well as take advantage of the additional weeks and months to potentially get a better sense as far as exactly where we're going to be. Fingers crossed there will be some of the factors that will become a little bit clearer as the fall goes on. Yes.
Is Bettina asking for a preliminary opinion? It seems to me that in the past, Susan did.
She has in the past, but I have not received a request for a preliminary yet.
Okay.
And honestly, if there was ever a don't rush me year for the levy, this is probably it.
Yeah.
It's, you know, there's been some years where it's been pretty straightforward. You know, my recollection was that the levy discussion for this one last year was one of those where it was, you know, everybody had some things that they needed to do, but it was pretty routine, you know, additions to expected expenses, and it was kind of, we're all just going to take the PTEL increase, right? Right. And away we went.
You know, do we have an accounting at this point of extraordinary expenses due to the closure and the reopening? And what, I know we're ahead of ourselves, but at the same time, that we might want to have that number as a standalone, just what we have and what we will continue to be spending.
Yeah, I do have that, and that is one of the challenges built into the
Mhm.
beginning of the budget for next year is that, you know, some of the items that we've got that we've added in as expenses, like SpringShare and Tutor.com, you know, in terms of hedging our bets, we kind of need to assume that we're still going to need to be paying for some of those next year, because we will, if, you know, things haven't gone back to normal. We'll need those digital extensions. So we have to factor those in, which is another feature there. And much shorter answer, yes, we've got a list.
Mhm.
Yeah, you know, there's things that we may be offering, services that that are very desirable to the public, and there may be things they wish will continue after this, just because we're all getting back together.
Yeah.
Maybe Tutor.com is still a really good product to have.
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me at all. That will probably be a consideration budgetarily when we come out of this, as
Mhm.
far as some things that we end up hanging on to. I would guess Slack will probably end up being one of those. That's been very easy in terms of convenient, in terms of like ongoing staff discussion. And SpringShare will probably be another that's proving to have a long statistics module, and we've been looking for a solution to that. So yeah.
That's SLACK and Spring Share. Is that one word?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Tutor.com, we're just getting. Would be thrilled if that took off. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Mhm. Just a general question, Eric. In the past, you mentioned that up until the roof issue, that we've been just taking the P-tail that the village has taken. Has that always been the case? Was the roof situation just the only exception?
There was one other exception where the library board went. That was back in 2006.
Okay.
And that was that the library had, in somewhat contentious discussion with the village, moved from a situation where the village had always been setting the library's levy for 10, 15 years and not really providing for much increase. The library board at that time made the decision to really assert itself and make clear that increases were needed. The library was in poor physical condition. The roof needed to be replaced. The HVAC had experienced a catastrophic failure. So we had water coming down. We had no heat coming up. It was not great. So the library board at that time, for just one fiscal year, made a full 5% increase to the levy, which is as high as you can take it without triggering truth in taxation. You go over a 5% increase, then you have to hold public hearings, and there's a variety of other things that kick in then as well.
Okay.
Has the village ever not taken, used option, what is it, 2 before, where they take the P-tail without the CPI? Have they ever done that in the near past?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't think so.
They're pretty. The village has been pretty consistent. You know, there have been a few years, particularly during the recession. I know there was some very serious discussion as far as you know, holding the rate steady during some of those years. I don't recall a specific year that it was ever approved. You know, and Kathy, is as you know, since you've had a number of these conversations with this party, it is kind of interesting that Kathy O would be the person that would be arguing for holding that CPI rate out, because in the past she's been very much a supporter of the you have to capture the revenue.
Right. She's been a real
Each
doomsayer as far as
right,
building projects.
right. So it
And
was kind of an interesting turn to have her on the other side of that,
yeah,
because generally in the past at meetings, as well as I know some of the conversations you've had with her talking about the levy, she's usually been pretty adamant that, you know, you've got to take that PTAL increase.
sure. And also she's very invested in the sales tax.
Yeah,
So knowing
yeah,
that's down, I don't know why she would cut any other corners. It doesn't make any sense. But
yeah.
maybe it's her going away wish for everyone. I don't know.
You know, that had occurred to me too. I mean, she is in a position where she'll be handing off to a different
Yeah.
village president in the spring. I don't know how that factors in. I'm not going to gripe too much. Overall, Kathy O has been, she's been a calm, firm hand on things during all the nonsense for Lake Bluff, when some of the other village administrators have been less calm. You know, even I don't know if either of you saw the rant that the Lake Forest mayor went on early on in all this, but you know, he had the right of it that people weren't following the rules and that they needed to, but
Yeah.
it wasn't exactly calm.
No.
Well, it hasn't been a
So
calm year, so.
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
true.
So
That's
really,
true.
we don't have any obligation to follow the village.
No.
And
Yeah.
we're not, I don't think we're considering doing anything extremely on the other side. So we have to watch out for the best needs of the library,
Yeah.
which are,
Yeah.
you know.
Another question there, Eric. The operating budget is with the reserve balance you put down on this handout is 32.4% of operating budget.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, what is that? Is that a good number, or do you prefer to see that at 40, or is it okay at 32? And then do we happen to know what the village uses as their number as well?
I believe the village aims for their general reserve. I believe they aim for 75%.
Okay.
But that's just off the top of my head. I would have to check with Drew on that to refresh
That's
my
okay.
memory.
I'm just curious as to
Yeah.
what their numbers are.
The village does, because they do a lot of capital projects, they also put most of their reserve money into special reserves, which they
Okay.
then build up for years. And those can get pretty high. I know in the past I've seen, you know, where they've had, you know, gotten $7 or $8 million in those special reserves at times for these, you know, big
Yeah.
big projects where they're working with IDOT on things, as they were planning to do on Green Bay this year. Their operating budget, I think, is 4.25, around there.
Okay.
Um,
And so what
for the library?
Yeah.
For the library, then, what we had kind of discussed is our ultimate goal was to get it up to 50%.
Okay.
The reason being that in discussing and working on the reserve over the past 10 years, because it was kind of new territory, working on growing that and how we were going to do it year by year for the library board, because we hadn't at all in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
But as it's fallen out, the goal has really been to keep 25% in general reserve, if at all possible, as kind of a full emergency fund.
Mm-hmm.
That we never want to be in a situation as we were in 2006, where we had major projects that that happened that needed to be dealt with. The roof was a bit unexpected. The HVAC, you know, we knew was going to be a problem. But to never have a situation where there's a capital project that comes up, we don't have money to deal with it. So
Yeah.
keeping 25% is a minimum for a real emergency that has to be paid for. And then at the same time, building up to that 50 to 60% territory for the general reserve, knowing that we've got expected capital expenses that are going to come up. The next one will probably be, major work again on the HVAC system. They've got about a 20 to 30 year life expectancy. So looking for another 10, 15 years out, the goal really coming off of the roof replacement in 2018 was, let's get that general reserve built back up so that we've got it up to 50 to 60% so that we don't have to spend ourselves down to zero in 10 years when we do the HVAC.
Okay.
And where are we now with that goal? Are we?
Well, we've gotten ourselves off to a solid start.
Yeah.
Let me bring that back up here. That was one of the numbers I had there in. Where's my share screen? There's my share screen. Okay. Here we go. So I actually just earlier this week got the preliminary audit numbers from Sikich, and after the end of last fiscal year, then our reserve sat at 335,542.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I overlooked
Which
that. 30.
Which from where we had started at in 2018 after 2 fiscal years it's a good solid start.
Yeah.
Means that we've met our goal when we were at 280,000. I think was about where we ended at after the roof project. We've been putting the 20,000 a year in as a transfer to reserve that we had targeted, as well as additional funds on top of that.
We've done well with that.
So
that's good.
So far, so good.
Yeah.
And just in terms of budgeting, of course, something I think that we'll want to continue to target, continue to grow that number, regardless of how we come down with a levy and need to juggle the budget around. I wouldn't that the PTEL limit with the full CPI, that's the easiest, most straightforward one to budget towards, obviously, but none of these aren't doable. They could all be done to varying levels of discomfort. When you're talking about a straight frozen levy, because you're factoring out the consumer price index, you are losing purchasing power at that point, so you are to some extent taking it. But when you've got a cut, then the question really is, I think, what is going to be best and most sensible for the fiscal year ahead, as well as positioning ourselves for the fiscal years thereafter. One thing that I would hate for it to see us do, and that, in terms of projecting out the budget, that I'm really taking a look at making sure that we avoid, would be a situation where we, really crunch things down budgetarily, frozen levy, but then find ourselves in a position where, in order to stay on top of things financially, we feel like we've got to go over the PTEL in a follow-up year. That to me feels like it's an exercise in, if not necessarily futility, then at least not great fiscal management.
Oh, well, I know we're not looking for a vote or a decision right now, but I can.
Correct.
would firmly, I'm very comfortable saying that I see no reason for us to not take advantage of the PTEL with the CPI, and I
Yeah.
can't think of a good reason not to pursue that plan. It's also consistent with what we always do.
Okay. I would say then, you know, at the October meeting, you know, let's relay the thoughts from the finance committee, and then target that November date, November meeting of the library board to, you know, approve our levy.
So
Okay.
what, does that mean there'll be a finance meeting between the two meetings?
Though it's in part dependent on, you know, the sense as far as whether there's more to discuss. If there isn't really anything new that comes out of the woodwork, the general sense of the members of the finance committee is that, you know, we already discussed everything that was on the table at the other meeting. Then, you know, it's always possible to forego that. Generally, the finance committee votes to make a recommendation. I would, you know, generally suggest that that's a good path to go on, but it's not a necessary step, I guess is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know Zoom is awesome. Everybody loves Zoom, but you know, there's weeks where I look to decrease my Zoom time.
Yeah, that's coming up a lot recently. Yeah, Zoom gaps.
Yeah, there've been a few days here in where I think I've spent. That's a lot.
Eric, what about this thought? If we have a general discussion in October, and if the leaning of the board is to make one of those three decisions, is there any harm in voting on it in October, and then you'll be notifying the
No.
village board? So
Yeah.
we could bypass. I mean, I don't know how Bill feels, and I want to hear from Bill, but I mean, you know what my recommendation is. So if we don't necessarily have to pass a recommendation to the board, but have a good discussion. And unless there's some strong reasons not to pursue this avenue, then I don't know why we wouldn't.
No,
That's fine.
I agree with you, Kathy. I think that I do think that, again, not seeing all the numbers, but I would assume that we have a larger percentage with the personnel costs in there, and we know that those numbers are going to have to go up with that, and there's nothing that we can control in that. And if we don't, we're going to be faced with the following year with going maybe
Right.
above what's going on. So
Yeah.
the so that would be my vote at the moment as well.
I think it's more noteworthy within the community for us to take an exceptional move on another year than to do what we do all the time, year after year after year.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, but we can follow up with this in October with the board and see what they have to say.
But that's probably a good thing. If we vote as a board on that's what we want to do. And you're saying, Eric, that the finance committee for the village will be making their decision in November.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I mean, I guess at best, then we'll just confirm. Hopefully, that's where it will end, or confirm kind of our decision then at our November board meeting.
Yeah, and that's there's a fair amount of conservative paranoia that's in my recommendation. You know, generally, I stand on this. You know, let's get consensus. And let's just get it approved and done with here in October. Easiest, cleanest way to do it. It's done. It's out of the way. You can get on with the next step of the budget process going into the winter months. But I don't know, 2020, it's just kind of like something's going to happen, you know.
Yeah.
It's kind of like maybe we should, let's just wait. But I mean, you don't have to. If the board would really like to, take action at the October meeting, if there's consensus and, desire to just get it done, that's fine. Honestly, there isn't really that I can see any serious negatives to
Mhm.
just taking care of it then.
Yeah.
If the board has a strong opinion and that changes for some reason between October and November, which I can think of one really big event that could change everything, then the board has every right to change their opinion at the November
Yeah.
meeting. I mean, nothing is going to,
Yeah.
so. But anyway, whatever the board wants to do is fine with me.
Yeah.
It seems silly to stall an obvious decision, but if it's not obvious with everyone else, then we wait. So.
Yeah.
Eric
Okay.
still out there somewhere?
Eric, are you frozen? It looks.
All right.
Oh. Blah.
Bill, we probably could just adjourn.
Yes, we could make a motion to adjourn.
I would move to adjourn at 8:10.
Okay.
And I can text Eric that we've made that decision.
Okay,
Okay.
that sounds good. He's very good.
Okay, I'll make the notes and I'll send them to you and Eric.
Great. Thanks very much, Kathy.
Sure thing. Wait a second. Let's just, I've got a text from Eric here. Oh, now it's got my passcodes. Okay, he's logging back. I'll let him know that we do here. Yeah. Okay. So
Okay.
call it off.
All right.
Okay.
Have a nice
great. Thanks.
evening.
Good to see you. Take care.
All right. You too.
Bye-bye.